major oncology guidelines such as the American Society of Clinical Oncology and the National Comprehensive Cancer Network do not recommend PGX testing for tamoxifen. Pharmacogenomic guidelines like the CPIC and the Dutch Pharmacogenetics Working Group, they strongly advise using an aromatase inhibitor in poor metabolizers. So why do we see this discrepancy between the different specialties? Could it reflect differences in how the various specialties appreciate and evaluate evidence? Or it's a different kind of clinical application that they're using for?
So in developing guideline, I firmly believe that you need a representative committee. If you look at the committees that have been convened by these other organizations you mentioned, you'll find there's very little expertise in terms of pharmacogenomics in there. But then conversely, when you look at the pharmacogenomics guidelines which have been developed, there's very little expertise in terms of clinical or medical oncologists on there, for example, and so on. So subject-specific specialists are missing from those guidelines largely. So I think it is really important to have a representative committee, and on that committee, then you can argue back and forth in terms of what is the best way to go forward. And that's why in the CERSI guidelines, we've taken that decision deliberately to make sure we have a representative committee with the relevant specialists who are using the drugs in the everyday practice, being available and visible within the committee, having their views, everybody listening to their views, and they're also listening to the views of people who are pharmacogenetic enthusiasts, and then coming to consensus, which is hugely important in order for us to be able to move forward with the representative guideline which takes into account all the views. If you look at the CP guidelines, let's say clopidogrel, I'm sorry to go back to clopidogrel, there's a paper which is not published yet, which highlights that very few of the none of the big cardiology journals have actually cited the CP guidelines at all on clopidogrel. Okay, so even though these guidelines are fantastic guidelines, they are ignored by the relevant specialists. I think the best way to be able to change that is collaborative working and making sure that everybody understands everybody else's views in order to move forward.